Welcome to the Higher Ed Jobs Podcast, Ask the Expert Edition. I'm Andy Hipple, the Chief Operating Officer and one of the co-founders of Higher Ed Jobs.
And I'm Kelly Sherwin, the Director of Editorial Strategy. Today, we're joined by Daniel B. Griffith, a longtime Higher Ed Jobs contributing writer and author in residence, as well as a mediator, educator, lawyer, HR leader, and author with more than 30 years of experience helping professionals and organizations navigate conflict, communication, and workplace challenges. Dan specializes in mediation, negotiation, and conflict resolution across higher education, nonprofit, government, and business settings. His book, Everyday Mediator, 7 Practices for Navigating Conflict, focuses on helping individuals build the skills to address conflict in everyday work and life. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
So we have a listener-submitted question for you, and I think we'll have a lot to discuss here. So I'll start with the question and we'll get your thoughts on it. The question is, how do I navigate maintaining and building relationships at my institution after a restructure that involved the elimination of my role and being offered another role at the institution with a pay cut? And the listener actually goes on to give a little bit more background that I'll add here. They said, I've learned that this restructure was happening behind the scenes with a high level of secrecy. So there's definitely some loss of trust on my end. I'm also struggling with how to show up professionally while still allowing myself to process how everything unfolded. So Dan, where do you want to start with this?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Andy. Good to see you both and good to spend some time here. Well, as a starting point, actually, when you first submitted this to me for me to look at, I responded back that this sounded a little familiar to my own situation with a few changes. My situation was I was actually part of the whole DEI change going on in universities. And I had my job eliminated. I was offered a new position, not with a pay cut, and really not the secrecy and lack of trust that's referred to here. But the reality is, if that by chance is the kind of situation we're talking about, there was a lot of scrutiny going on broadly. And so when I hear that person talk about, secrecy, trust, one question is, was there a reason for that? Did the person ask in terms of what's going on? And I'm not trying to make an assumption here, but at least the situation I had, it really was a time where my supervisor, who didn't want to do what she had to do, was trying to protect the employees, myself included, by realigning them, but had to do it under very unique circumstances. So that'd be my first question is simply, what's meant by secrecy? And obviously this person is due some transparency. So the question is whether those kind of questions are asked and how this was responded to. I can understand it feeling a lack of trust. I can understand the disappointment. And depending on the situation, there may be a reality behind that because it may not have been handled effectively. But it's just a bigger, broader question, first of all, in terms of how this was managed and what we mean by secrecy, whether or not there's reasons for being a little bit confidential for a while. Obviously, in my situation, eventually I was explained to me what was going on. It was I had total trust in my supervisor, which may be different from this person. So there's those dynamics to really explore. I would say beyond that would be the idea that certainly an explanation is due. So that would be the inquiry to start with, is simply, hey, I'm disappointed. I don't understand this. And if you're not feeling you're getting an explanation, that would be a concern. That really would. And then how do you navigate that? Obviously, if you can ask the right questions, it would be, can I know more about why the restructuring, why this resulted in a pay cut? By the way, does this mean that my duties are different and maybe not the same? Or others impacted? Is this a broader perspective? So those are legitimate questions that I would hope are being answered by this person. And if not, which may be implied in the question, then maybe it's an issue of true distrust and a valid concern this person has. Maybe the final question, if there's any follow-up after this, would be the final issue would be, if that's the case, the reality is you still have to show up. You still have to be professional. You still have to do your work as long as you have a job. And, it is hard. I can well imagine. I've had situations going to work where didn't feel appreciated, a whole different circumstance. And it is hard. And it is tempting to reduce effort. It's tempting to feel resentment, but it's not the people around you that are necessarily causing that problem. It is a situation as it is. So do the best you can, be professional, act accordingly, and then maybe take your time to first of all figure out what's going on in your institution, what's going on in your situation, push where you can to get legitimate answers. And if that trust is really violated, then bide your time, plan, get a support system around there, do all the things you can to methodically, I would say methodically look for that next opportunity versus being rash, being reactive, doing anything that diminishes your professional standing, your approach, because that's not going to do you any good, even if things have been caused to you, this harm of some sort. So there's some initial thoughts that come to mind when I think of that situation.
So Dan, you said, make sure to follow up and ask questions, which I completely agree. That's a good approach. Just to clarify though, are you suggesting that this person talk with their immediate supervisor or they go to HR? Like how does a person know where and when, or is there another resource that they should be connected with?
Well, obviously, I think how was this decision initially communicated with them? So obviously, the questions would be good to start there. Is that their former? I don't know if implied to this, by the way, in the restructuring is I had a boss, now I have a new boss. So somewhere between those two would be, can I know more what's going on? I don't want to operate in the dark. So yeah, that would be the case. I do think that if for some reason you're not feeling that trust, hopefully there is the appropriate avenue, like human resources. That's the typical place to go for initial response. Maybe the institution is large enough, they might have an ombuds. I need help navigating the situation. I need to understand what's going on and understand why I'm placed I am, and I'm not getting, probably they're getting some answers. I'm not getting them in a satisfactory fashion. I'd really like to know more about what's going on. I'm not trying to make a big deal of it, but for me to be an employee, a partner in the relationship, to keep supporting institution, whatever, what have you, I feel I'm kind of do this. So can someone help me navigate this to get the answers I need?
Dan, I really feel like the human part of this is something that you keep coming around. Like the feelings here, let's just call it out. They're legitimate. You should be feeling that way. Do not deny yourself those feelings.
Precisely.
And trust is something that takes a lot to build. And even in good relationships, it needs to be built and rebuilt. It doesn't just happen. And something like this, even if it turns out well, is going to feel like a violation of trust.
Yeah.
I'd also say trying to just kind of read into it. If these are the feelings that are being expressed at this stage of the game and this much was expressed, I do think asking the questions are a very good idea, and doing so in a professional and I'd say concise way.
Right.
To expect answers to give you any more satisfying of a feeling is probably not a reasonable expectation. And leaving it at that is the professional thing to do. If they don't want to tell you, they are not going to tell you.
Right.
And trying to force that issue is not going to help things,
right.
Which I think produces for many folks a feeling of helplessness in addition to that lack of trust. What I would say to that feeling of helplessness is, and legitimizing the feelings about feeling like you're caught in a situation that was not something that was warranted, is go out there, be a professional, and show the community they're every bit as good at doing this as you were your previous position. And what they did was a mistake. And give it some time. If you want, people can vote with their feet. If you want to look someplace else, go for it. That you're entitled to that. But if you don't want to look someplace else, do a good job in this role and show them that you want another role that is of your choosing, and say, listen, not only did I take my medicine the way you asked me to, I thrived in the situation you put me, and I think I'd really appreciate being recognized with a role that's a little bit better suited for my skills.
Right. Absolutely. I think, the kind of questions you're asking, what I think it is too, is when this is first happening, it's a shock. So it's a matter of, I've got to process this a little bit. So the worst thing we can do is be reactive, be too quick about it. I might, if I were me, I might think in terms of, I've got to get a plan together of how I get my answers, a plan together how I manage my current work here. I agree. Concise questions, get the questions answered. You can't push too far, but it would be that, where can you get good explanations? Internally think about, is that satisfying? Yes or no? Probably not in terms of building trust, but obviously then moving forward to say, okay, that's my next plan then is how do I navigate my current job, and plan for that. How do I navigate for my future? Does that mean staying here? Does that mean moving on? but all that taking time, all that as internally hard that may be to plan that accordingly. Yeah, the professional approach, non-reactive, demonstrating that professional, you're qualified, you do good work, that shouldn't be diminished. But yeah, in that too is, by the way, with your new workplace, that's all the more reason you don't want to complain, be resentful, create this sort of story around your situation that people had no part in the first place, just because of what you've experienced. All these things are crucial to put yourself in the best spot, knowing that your situation is not ideal.
Dan, I think you're spot on not being reactive, because that's only going to make the situation a little bit more worse. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast of not burning bridges.
Right.
And I know we've all acknowledged how hard this is, especially with the pay cut. I mean, that adds a little even
Right.
more just hurt to the situation. But yeah, trying to be professional and continuing to show up, I think is so important. We are not trying to diminish, like, oh, this is easy, just go, keep on keeping on. But being very, very strategic and thinking thoughtfully is definitely the best approach.
Maybe one thing to add is we're talking what's happening internally. So what is this person doing also externally in terms of their own support system, processing it, at least family, friends, whatever. And even there, I mean, legitimately expressing concerns, obviously that's more confidential, but hopefully among people who can help you process and problem solve and proactively look at this while you're hurting, while you're feeling disappointed, while you're not hiding that, but not to make this a whole, don't let it destroy you. I mean, that's what I think sometimes these kind of disappointments can do. Find the right support to navigate, to process this, to be who you are, to be confident and proud of who you are, regardless of what externally has happened to you.
That's well put, Dan. I kind of want to just end on one kind of footnote to the conversation. We've talked a lot from the candidate perspective, and definitely the healing part that you just brought up, Dan. I like the fact that this candidate did not do anything rash in response to it,
Right.
and is kind of trying to figure out, and I think the word they used was process what has happened. I think from the employer side, it's really, really interesting. In my 30 years with higher ed jobs, one of the things you commonly hear from employers is, how do we keep good employees? And I think when things like this happen, there's a tunnel vision that employers can fall into, which is, well, this isn't necessarily an employee that I'm that worried about. If we lose them, I'm going to be bummed, but that's part of the cost of doing business. I really don't like that, because I think it sets an example that if this can happen to one of my colleagues, this can happen to me. There's a secondhand effect of doing things this way. Being transparent, being open, making real reasons and making them public as to why these moves are being made is the right way to do this.
Right.
To do a process that is not transparent and is very much hidden and have results just announced and people are told to accept, I think does far more damage to the organization over time than whatever you might be saving from that pay cut or reorg that you just did.
Absolutely. To me, implied in the question is all those things not happening as you've described. It's like, if I'm in those decision-making roles, and it can't be just one person, it's a lot of people involved in this reworking of things. It's like, did it not dawn on someone? It's like, hey, and is it not just this employee, but others? It's like, hey, if we're doing this, if we need to do it, we realize it has to be done. Maybe it's budget, maybe funding, whatever is not coming in the way it had. It's like, do we not need to think about the end of this in terms of who is impacted? It's astounding that that's implied in this question, that somehow just, hey, you're moving over here, here's your pay. Probably not saying it this way, but don't complain, just do your job. That's the implication I'm getting from this question, and it's astounding that an organization would do that. But absolutely a lesson to those to not do that, to really think in terms of methodically doing this, recognize the impacts, explaining along the way, working with them to manage situations as possible, validate their contributions, all these things that need to happen as it's happening, so that that person can be repositioned as best possible under difficult circumstances.
Well, thank you so much, Dan.
I appreciate the opportunity to share on this. Hope it was valuable for people.
And thank you for listening. If you have questions for experts like Dan or other thoughts about this conversation, please feel free to email us at podcast@higheredjobs.com or send us a direct message on X @higheredcareers. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon.